Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the SOMM TV podcast. This is Jason Wise. Very, very exciting day. If you were listening to this pod on release day, we premiere my newest film, The Whole Animal, tomorrow in Chicago. And for you SOMM TV subscribers, it comes June 3rd. This is a film that we worked on for many years that takes a really important look at food as culture. To me, this is an incredibly important topic because I do think that, you go to expensive restaurants, you drink expensive wine, and sometimes it's easy to lose sight of the incredible story and evolution of how those things got where they are and how important it is to know that story when you drink it or eat it, and that there are people and processes behind those things. So I'm beside myself, and the team that worked on this did such a good job. June 3rd on SOMM TV. Right now, we have a 2-week free trial to SOMM TV that is in celebration of this new film. So you can sign up, preview everything we have, over 400 hours of original content, including The Whole Animal, our brand new film coming June 3rd, for 2 weeks without having to pay. So go to sommtv.com, do that, pour yourself a Harvey Wallbanger if you've listened to the last podcast, and enjoy SOMM TV. On today's podcast, we're going to turn the mic the opposite direction, and I'm going to be interviewed by Nicole MacKay, who is SOMM TV's managing editor of our online magazine. She is much smarter than I am, so I'm kind of afraid about this. We're going to talk about this film, The Whole Animal, but I'm sure a bunch of other topics as well. Nicole,
hey,
I give you the mic. This is your first time on the SOMM TV podcast. That's like running for politics and becoming the president. Is that what it's like?
I'm honored to be on the podcast. Thank you so much for having me and giving me the honor of being able to ask you the questions, because that doesn't happen very often.
Well, yeah, because I don't shut up long enough for people to ask me anything, generally.
Well, I wasn't going to say that, but that's true.
It's fair. It's fair. You're Canadian. You're too nice. Okay, so fire away. I mean, I can't wait to talk about this movie, and I hope I hope everybody tunes in and enjoys it June 3rd. It is a labor of love.
It is an amazing film. I've watched it twice now. You've given me some sneak peeks. And I have to say, the respect and the beauty that you've given to The Whole Animal it's inspiring. And this is coming from a quasi-vegetarian.
Oh, God. That's either really good for the film or really bad.
It's really, really good. I was so impressed. And I want to get into the culture of it. Like you said, this is about the culture of food and the culture of the animal and the culture of meat in how we grow up. So sure. I want to actually start with the process of filmmaking, because this is a world that I'm not familiar with. How, in context of the pandemic, how did you film around the world?
Yeah, alcohol certainly helped. It was a very challenging thing because this is one of those movies that we'd filmed a bunch of it before the pandemic, but we weren't finished. And, spoilers aside for anybody who is, obviously, if you're listening to this, you have not seen the film unless, you're my mom or something. But it's one of these films that purposefully goes, at least the Western world goes all over the world, South America and Europe and things, to either prove points or show certain aspects of this kind of idea. And so it was a son of a bitch, frankly, because of the pandemic. And so, we just sort of had to refocus some things. We wanted to shoot some things in Asia that we were unable to do. We sort of turned our heads to where can we get to? And so, if you listen to last week's podcast with the great Kim Alter, who's a wonderful chef, she was going to be in the movie, but we made her a bigger part of the film, and it was the right decision by far. And then, we sort of threw everything at going to Italy to shoot this one last scene. It was challenging. It's hard. Anybody who has traveled is dealing with probably the same thing that we are dealing with, but also in a tougher manner, because we don't want people to be wearing masks on camera. So you have to do all that stuff. And, it's an odd process, to say the least. Alcohol helps, as I said.
So when you you planned this how many years ago? When did this start?
I don't want to admit this, but this film was made almost, part of it was made concurrently with SOMM 2. So this is going to sound bonkers, and it is.
My job is dropped like that.
Yeah, I know. when you make documentary films, we joke there are some people in this movie that probably forgot they're in it. When you make documentary films, there's several different tracks, but a lot of times if they're ones that are really special to you, they take a long time. It's not out of the ordinary for a film to take 5 to 10 years in some capacity. And so the interesting part about this movie is Sony, this is going to get too geeky. And for you wine people, I swear we're going to get to some good stuff. But Sony had put out their first true, real 4K cinema camera right at the time of SOMM 2, Into the Bottle. And we shot most of that film on that. But we really wanted to maximize this really expensive camera. And so we started shooting this film. And the good news about that is the technology, though it might seem like it's changed, it really hasn't. So we were able to continue to use this camera for the entire process. And so the film looks pretty uniform and, you know, was shot state of the art as far as it goes. You know, I mean, this is a camera that you've seen movies in the theater many times that were shot on. So if we had started a year or two earlier, it wouldn't have been able to be done this way.
I see.
This is for all you camera geeks out there.
So the next question, though, in context of timeline, you might not even remember, but when you were planning this film and where you wanted to go, I mean, you hit South America, you hit in the north of Italy. You know, how do you storyboard something like this and include all the different cultures and how they perceive food and the whole animal?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I think if you've ever gone on like a wine trip and you're trying to figure out where am I going to go on the wine trip and you're trying to build out an itinerary, you can just sort of throw everything at the wall, or else you can say, I'm going to try to go and organize my trip by, you know, dream places / history / I've never had this grape or blah, blah, blah. And I think the structure of this film, with no spoilers, is that it's centered around kind of a cookbook, right? There's this like imaginary type cookbook, and we sort of go through it and show the recipes and travel with it. It's like seeing the cookbook rather than reading the cookbook. And so, you know, when we storyboarded this, we looked at, you know, there were some places like if you were going to talk about steak or beef or meat or anything like that, and you don't go to Argentina, you're doing a tremendous disservice to that story. And so we knew we were going to go there. The question was where. And then the same goes for when you're looking at charcuterie and curing meat and all of that stuff. If you don't go to France, you pretty much are doing a complete disservice. And you know, a lot of the movie centers on traditional kind of homemade, localized type things that evolved out of necessity rather than some 3-star Michelin invention, which, spoiler alert, most of those are stolen from small villages in Europe or something like that. So we knew we'd go to Italy because Italy is just the king of Provençal little dishes that are one town makes it, the next town doesn't. And it's made from, you know, something that we may discard, but they prize. And so it's really, you know, from a storyboarding standpoint, it was kind of a large process, but it was also, what can we pull off considering COVID, considering, you know, a lot of the chefs in this film are very famous and they're very busy. And so it was like, how can we steal 20 minutes of their time, an hour of their time, 2 hours of their time? So it's kind of like a mixture, you know, when you do a documentary, you sort of follow the river, I guess, is a weird answer. And that's probably why it took so damn long.
The end product, is it what you envisioned it from the beginning, or can you kind of explain if it changed trajectories? That's a tough word.
Yeah, it is, honestly, it is. I think that, you know, it has a lot of similarities for those of you listening to this pod to SOMM 2. I think Into the Bottle it's its closest kind of film. This is sort of I look at it as a sister film to SOMM Into the Bottle, where you have a lot of stories about one story. And so it's not as much an anthology film where everything's disconnected as SOMM 2, but yeah, I think it is. You know, we had some very ambitious ideas about filming in Japan and some other things that were unable to happen. It's been very hard to film in parts of Asia during the pandemic. We also thought we were going to film in Australia for a certain reason, and I don't know if anybody's read the news, but Australia was not easy to film in either. And so we sort of shifted, and I think for the better, honestly, because the story's a little more focused, and we want to do another one. And for anybody listening, you know, hopefully my answers, if confusing as they are, that you may not have seen the film yet, hopefully they inspire you to get a nice glass of red wine and fire up the grill and watch this thing. You know, I really hope so.
Let's talk about inspiration a little bit more, actually, because that is where I wanted to go with your family culture growing up. Like, what role did meat play in the day-to-day in your family? Where did you grow up? Iowa, wasn't?
No. Ohio.
Ohio.
You know, Yeah. Well, you're from Calgary. I mean, it's okay.
I'm not from here. I just live here.
That's fair. All right. So, yeah, I grew up in Cleveland. My mom was a teacher. I wouldn't say we had a tremendous amount of money. And meat was one of these things that was not taken for granted. I grew up with mostly slow cooked stuff. So this is now obviously I'm speaking as my childhood memories. I'm sure my mom listening to this will go, maybe there's some exceptions to what you're saying, but I remember a lot of corned beef. I remember a lot of pot roast. I remember that kind of stuff. I remember my mom scrounging and having to save every single penny. And I mean, I remember her having to put 75 cents in the gas tank because scrounging for real with 4 kids, which was her fault. That's your fault, Mom. You had 4 kids. But I remember it being a very tough situation. So I grew up with meat in my mind being something that was sort of a treat. I mean, you had leftovers and we never threw anything away.
No.
If we had corned beef the day before, we had corned beef the next day, or it was turned into something else. It would turn into a casserole or it was turned into, and so I just grew up like I think a lot of people in the Midwest and probably a lot of people of that age where you just didn't waste stuff. If you had pork chops, it was a big deal. Pork chops were like not the cheapest thing. So I grew up with that kind of thing. And that definitely inspires this film. I mean, there's no question that it's real easy to take food for granted when you just see it as prepackaged stuff. And this is not a commentary on people's behavior, because if you don't know or have a frame of reference, I can't say that I blame people for devaluing something. If you look at
when you don't recognize it, when you look at it, how can you value something you don't recognize? Right? It's not
for sure.
It's not the face of the animal, or like it's in a package. And
definitely.
That's which is leading me into, now that you're a father and you have 2 girls, is it? How are you instilling the respect of the whole animal in your food culture in your family?
That's a really good question, and probably something that, I think every parent wants to be more conscious. I mean, I'm in that stage now where I have a 5-year-old that I just want her to try everything. I don't want to make a big deal out of it. So I'm in this stage where it's like, my girls they love steak. They love hamburgers. They love the stuff that at that age, it's pretty palatable. Mm-hmm. And they love almost anything unless you make it something that seems out of the ordinary. And then I think what kids do is they go, am I supposed to like this? Is it okay that I like this? Or is it cool that I like this? And they have this kind of like value that gets attached to food. So, I mean, from my end, I think the most important thing is to don't challenge kids for the sake of challenging kids is what I try to do. But I'm also doing SOMM TV and making these films, being around. I mean, I'm around oysters all the time. And, I made a film about sea urchin and when you're around a lot of like wonderful wines and the people that make them, you end up seeing a lot of different stuff. So my kids have been exposed to crazy stuff that I never was. And most people aren't, in a day-to-day basis. So I think I'm lucky kind of by osmosis that my kids see stuff and, and hopefully that rubs off as adults where they don't want to waste food but it's not just that too. There's a real important thing where if you've ever worked in a vineyard or harvested apples or something, you can't throw away a half-eaten apple without thinking about the people that worked on it. So it's more than just the waste of the food. It's also the work that goes into it. All of these other little things that sort of become, they stack up and they add up and they make that apple more than just the snack I have in the middle of the day.
Right.
And so, yeah, so I think there's an element of also trying to expose kids and people to like the process of something getting to the table, which sounds really cliche. And if you look at Instagram and open your phone, it's like everybody claims to walk this walk. And then when you actually get into the world, it's like they're there just to take selfies.
Right.
When it happens, which sounds like I sound like an old man, but the truth is there is an element of walking the walk. And we tried very hard to film with people in this movie who truly do that. They're not
you
there
absolutely
because they're famous.
The authenticity behind the people that you chose to feature is very clear and very transparent. The one I found the most interesting was, and I apologize, I don't have her name in front of me, but she was a vegetarian for more than half of her life, she said.
Yeah.
And
Dusky Estes, yeah.
Yes, yes. And and now is a rancher, or she raises animals with such respect, and to the dying process too, which is, it's difficult for me to actually verbalize these things.
Yeah.
These animals die, and Kate Hale, who is also featured in the film, she's not shy about using the term carcass. It is a carcass. It's a dead animal. But the beauty and the artistry that goes into butchery and creating something delicious and for enjoyment out of a dead animal it's a beautiful thing. It's really amazing, and that is definitely portrayed in the film. So well done.
Thank you. I mean, these are what's interesting. You just cited two women who are talking about the process of this, and I think it's really important that to show that I think a lot of what's being driven worldwide, and especially in California, about respect for this stuff is being done by women. And so this film is, I think, a really interesting look. I mean, Dusky is somebody who, she has walked the walk for 20 years in what she does. In Sonoma, she had a restaurant called Zazu. And, Kate Hill obviously has a Cooking with Wine show on SOMM TV and has an incredible charcuterie training and camp in France. I mean, these are people who are really doing it, not for Instagram. They are not,
not
for them.
Yeah.
This is like, they're trying to, it's their livelihood. They're farmers or educators, and they're trying to, and that's, this is going to sound strange, but that's the risk of making a film like this, because you don't want to make a film that just teaches people. You want to make a story that you can kick back and watch and have a good time. But also, I think any good documentary shows you a world you wouldn't have had access to otherwise. That's primarily what I think makes docs really important and separate. Mm-hmm. They don't have to be highbrow. They don't have to be, but they should give you some entertainment or take you out of your world, but also put you in another world you wouldn't have been able to see.
Yeah,
so,
there's an element of truth in documentaries that you can't deny. It's people's lives, and
there should be, at least. There's somewhere this is not the case, but yeah.
So I want to go on a little bit of a tangent, because the aha moment for me in this film, it actually came near the end. And I am a vegetarian who eats meat.
This is a whole other podcast.
I know.
How are you? You're a vegetarian who eats meat, huh? Okay.
I'm a vegetarian who eats meat. So obviously,
you're like a Venus flytrap. It's kind of like what you are. You're like
I don't purchase meat and I don't cook it, because I feel like you vote with your dollars, first of all, and supporting big chicken farms and things. That's just not how I roll. And I don't cook it because I'm not a very good cook. So for those reasons, I don't eat meat at home. But
ladies and gentlemen, the managing editor of the SOMM TV Magazine can't cook. All right, this is big.
I mean, I can follow a recipe and it's good, but I don't have the skill required to really understand pieces of meat and how to cook them to make them really delicious.
Yeah. And that also too is look, that's why you have chefs. That's why you have butchers. That's why,
that's where I was going with this. If I go out to a restaurant or if I'm at a dinner party and it's served, of course, I will respect the animal that is on the table and I would love to indulge in that meal. So that's why I'm not strict vegetarian. Where I'm going with this is that the way the last 3/4 of a century have gone, and, away from the small butcher, away from those special pieces, cuts that, the butcher has available all the time, to the grocery store where it's just fillets and it's just pork chops and, those main cuts. We've gotten into this supply and demand situation that is really hard to reverse right now, and to go back to that small butcher and go back to utilizing the entire animal. And I realized in the last portion of this film, and it is in the narrative as well, that people are not buying those cuts that require hours and hours of cooking. But in this very silver lining era that we are in with the pandemic, we have been gifted time at home to learn how to do that. People now have shifted their lives to possibly work from home permanently. Why don't we teach ourselves how to cook these immaculate cuts of beef and learn how to slow roast and learn how to braise and learn how to really add a respect to the animal again.
Yeah, well, it's also too, my thoughts are completely on that. And also, the one thing I don't want to do is put pressure, because I know, I remember, reading this article, which is it's like an Atlantic long read or something where like people are like, there's pressure on moms to make their own bread now.
No, there's
because
not.
of the pandemic.
Is there?
No, I know. Look, no, of course not. But I mean, like, you don't want to make people feel like if they can't do this or don't want to do this, there's something wrong. But here is the simple fact: if you go to Tuscany, or you go to Greece, or you go to, I don't know, North Africa or Istanbul, or just any of these incredible places that people travel to that are life-changing, southern Spain, any of the islands in the Mediterranean, you find that they slow cook stuff, or they cook it over fire for a long period of time, and they give you something that's so tender, and you're like, oh my God, this is incredible. Did you sous vide it or something? It's like, no, we just cooked it for a longer period of time, and it's the 10 times more flavorful. And I mean, there's the line at the end about this topic that you're talking about that I think is kind of mind-blowing to people, where they're like, wait, that is that? Because I thought that thing was only really expensive in nice restaurants, when I didn't know it was that cut, actually.
Right.
And so I think my thoughts on this are, you don't have to start, because there's no question, we are still working. I mean, I know that, especially considering if you're a mom, you have got 10 jobs. So the thought of having to cook something over the course of 3, 4, sometimes 6, 7 hours is really daunting. Mm-hmm. But there are ways to do it that are, for instance, like if you're going to make pulled pork for tacos or for whatever else, and you cook that down, that's like 3 meals for real. And you don't have to have a ton of it in every meal. But there are ways to really sort of consolidate and save money, but also have like the best tasting stuff you could possibly have.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's funny to say like use the slow cooker, but it's an amazing thing that this generation has really lost that.
Absolutely.
I mean, my parents, the slow cooker was on all the time. That's like how you made meals. And if it wasn't the slow cooker, you'd put something in the oven real low and it would cook over time. And I mean, just the concept of roasting a whole chicken sounds like, I don't want to pigeonhole like everybody here, but it's amazing how few people actually know how to just cook a chicken anymore.
Right.
It's this weird shattering thing that sort of happened. And during the pandemic, there was at least in America, I can't speak for Europe, but there was just like, oh my God, you go to the grocery store, there's no meat. There's no meat. And it was like, well, there still are whole chickens. And by the way, you can get them other places than the grocery store. Mm-hmm. Like, I promise you, no matter where you are in the country, there are ways to get real stuff and cook it. So my thoughts on this are, it's not just like morally, ethically, and monetarily right. It tastes better, this slow cook stuff. So I'm a huge proponent of that. And the idea that steak was supposed to be for a celebration, or was supposed to be not all the time, it's just fundamentally sane, because there's just not a lot of steaks on an animal. It's just, you look at an animal and it's like, well, I mean, you're not supposed to have a Wagyu filet taco, every single time you get tacos. It's like, what is going on right now? Yeah. It just makes no sense. Like, why would we use that cut in a taco? Right. I don't even understand it, because I don't know. Anyways, that's my soapbox.
So you created a movie for a soapbox, film, sorry.
That's fair.
So for people that are waiting to see it, or have seen it, or will see it, what do you want the main takeaway to be? What's the goal?
I very much wanted to make a film that gets into some topics that are, they're deeper, but you still want to eat afterwards. And I can't overemphasize how difficult a balance that is, because when you're talking about actual animals, and then you're also talking about how to cook said animals, there's a process in between that's really nobody wants to talk about. And I don't think for a second, nor would I advocate that people have to understand the process of an animal, dying to become food. But I think they should be aware that it happens. And it's in that process that it makes it very hard to make a film where you go, I want to go out and eat now, or I want to cook something at home now. And that was, as simple as that sounds, that's what I want a takeaway. I want somebody to go, I want to try something maybe I wouldn't try, or I want to try to cook something maybe. A lot of these dishes that we portray in this film, barring maybe one, any person can make. Any person can make. Though they're made by masters, any person can make them. And the good news with a lot of these dishes is you can't really F them up. You can maybe accidentally do X or Y and take it one direction or another. But frankly, you're not going to ruin it unless, you forget about it in the slow cooker for an extra 20 hours.
Right.
It's not, it's just not. So my hope is that there would be action, people would want to eat and want to think differently. And also too, I mean, I hope they want to see more. I'd like to make another film that goes to Polynesia and goes to, Asia and does all these stuff, because my ultimate dream here is to do one about barbecue and the origins of it and what it means and all of that. Because frankly, the story of how barbecue evolved is a lot like jazz. You think of people who love jazz music and you're like, all right, well, it's an American invention. Well, it's not. It is an invention that took 1,000 pieces to come in together, and it's an immigration story and an incredible thing, and barbecue is the same. And so I just would like very much for people to like this movie so we can make
so
more.
we can make another one. I think that's what's so interesting about the films that you make, is that you make one, despite where the inspiration came from it, and the number of opportunities for it to branch off into, like you said, barbecue, or, if you want to explore Asian cuisine, and, there's unlimited number of stories that you can explore. And it's just being able to tell all of them is the challenge, I suppose.
Yeah. So it's kind of like James Cameron's Avatar, but without all the money or budgets or
money.
audience.
Right. That's what we need. Money. Right. Dollar bills. So tell me about the filming overall. What was the most challenging part?
I'm going to give you an answer that's going to make no sense. If any listeners have ever traveled and driven through France, and you're aware of like the tolls and the effing tickets, those little tickets that you get, the speeding tickets that are like camera tickets.
Okay.
Listen, this is going to sound. I'm going to tell you a quick story really fast. We in order to film a lot of this film takes place in France, more than it seems, because a lot of the B-roll is in France. We filmed in Alsace. We filmed in Limoges, which is in the western part of France. We filmed in Bordeaux. We filmed in Gascony. We filmed all over. So it's like a whole loop around the entire, bottom half of France, sort of. Well, while driving, I think we got 19 speeding tickets because they had put in, maybe it was 20. They put in these effing, God bless it, cameras that are like these speeding ticket camera things that are just so terrible. Well, anyways, I mean, we were trying to go from place to place, and you have limited time, and you're always leaving later because everybody wants to hang out and do this or do that. And, in some cases you have an extra glass of wine, so you got to sleep over at the place. Then you're leaving really early in the morning, and you're kind of always racing. So we were in Limoges trying to find this place where we filmed a particular scene in the film. And we go across this bridge, and I was exhausted. So Jackson Myers, my cinematographer, producer, co-writer of this movie, he drove, and he speaks fluent French. And we crossed this bridge, and we had already gotten, I think, 10 of these goddamn tickets.
Are you notified when you get them?
You see
right
flash.
Away? Oh,
you see a flash go off. And even in the bright day, it nails you. And so this is going to sound like the most ridiculous story for the most challenging thing on a film where we filmed in like 7 countries. But okay, so we go across this bridge. It's like 1 a.m. We were running so late to get to the place we're staying. And we see the flash. And we're so mad because we've already had like 2,000 euros. You have to understand, our budgets on these films we are very careful with money, and we don't spend a lot. And so we've got like 2,000 euros in fines just from like going 4 miles over the speed limit. I mean, France is basically a communist country. So we go across this bridge and we get flashed by this ticket, and we're all swearing in the car. We're so mad. We realize we went the wrong way. So we turn around, and we turn around right at the end of the bridge. And we're like, all right, what was the speed limit? Like, all right, it was 40 kilometers an hour. So we're like, all right, do not go over, go exactly 38. So we go 38 kilometers across the bridge. We got another ticket. It was 25 kilometers going the opposite direction, was a different goddamn speed limit. So it was one after, it became a not funny comedy, but at the end of filming this in France, we racked up so many speeding tickets. I seriously, I went in loving France, thinking it was the most wonderful country. I left filming thinking, I was so mad. So aside from speeding tickets, I would say, give you a real answer. I would say representing kind of these incredible cultures and history and stuff, which is not a canned answer. It's really true that, when you film in Alto Adige in the north of Italy and you have them make speck, that's something that's like done, passed down generations for family. And if you mess it up, you're doing not just a disservice to this food, but you're doing a disservice to like their national identity. You know, I mean,
Like the towns and the areas that's their lives is this piece of food.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also like one thing that we tried to hint at, because you don't want to make this is not so much a political documentary, but you want to hint at like, there's this place, if you're listening, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the existence of Alto Adige. They make incredible white wine. They're in the very north of Italy, and they're part of a place called Tyrol. And they're part of South Tyrol, and they are part of Italy. And they speak a language called Tyrolean. It sounds like German, but if you're like in Munich and you try to speak to one of these people, you won't understand them and they won't understand you. So it's not, the language is not necessarily German. It is a Germanic language.
Wow.
Okay. The reason I say this is they don't have their own country. The North Tyrol is still part of Austria. Southern Tyrol is now part of Italy, which goes back to Mussolini and some very sketchy border redrawings that happened, anyways. So they sort of cling to these identities that they have. Some are grapes, some are foods, some are cheeses that they make. And it's this godly, beautiful country that is so incredible in the Alps. And so when you talk about speck for them, which is a very unique meat that is both salted and cured. So it has smoked and cured. And so it has a very different structural combination of being made than prosciutto or any of these other things you see on a charcuterie plate. It's a really, really important thing for their identity, in the way that I don't know that Americans and even Canadians have this type of a thing yet, where it's part of your existence in a way that when you see it in another place, it warms your heart.
Yeah.
For me, that's just if I see somebody in a Cleveland Browns shirt or something, t-shirt, I just think, oh, cool. I'm from Cleveland. So like for them though, this is generations upon generations of creating this dish. So in the film, there's tons of that kind of stuff. It just goes over and over and over. And that would be the biggest challenge. And I've yet to see whether that works, because every time I make a film, there'll be someone in the film who calls me and says, you got this wrong.
Really?
Like, oh man. Well, no, that's the nature of making a film. You can't do everything perfectly.
Right.
And, but hopefully we got it close,
Yeah. If you could go back to the beginning when you were storyboarding and when you were first kind of creating this idea, if you could go back and give that person advice, what would it be for creating this film?
Yeah. I would say, get a Peloton, maybe. No, I would say,
don't
there's don't, oh geez. My blood boils just even telling that story. Okay. I'm sure I'm going to make Jackson listen to this podcast just to hear that, because I can't even tell you. I was so mad. All right. Anyways, I would definitely, my films now have this sort of reputation that I'll cut to another country for a joke, like we'll just sort of go all over the place as a mosaic. And honestly, I wish that I knew the pandemic was going to happen. We barely made it out of Argentina. We literally were on one of the last flights out of that country before they completely locked down.
Right.
And we walked into Argentina thinking, I don't know, we were not joking, but not taking this pandemic seriously. And by the time we left, it was like, get out or you're stuck here for 4 months. It was wild. It was in the course of 11 days, everything changed. Yeah. And so if I could have known that, it would be interesting, but I would have, there's not much when you make a film that you are trying to follow, rather than writing it, you're trying to follow the through line from what people say and how they do. And it's really tough to give advice on that. I would definitely, I would like to answer that question 3 weeks after release.
Okay.
Because I'm sure, what you make a film 3 times, and the first time is when you kind of conceive of it. Second time is when you film it, and the third time is when you edit it. And then there's this strange thing where you realize, oh no, it's not real until you release it. So I guess maybe 4 times is how you make it.
Right.
And the release one is the one where it doesn't really matter what you think or what you planned. The audience has to take it and do their own thing with it. And that's up to them. And so we'll see. I don't know. The release is going to be interesting.
I love it.
Yeah.
It was, like I said, it was an inspiring film. It is an inspiring film, and it's beautiful, beautifully told. And the respect that goes into butchery and the whole animal, it's there. It's definitely evident. And so thanks for making such a great film.
Hey, I appreciate, there's a reason I'm able to do it. It's because I have a team around me that's much smarter than I am. Christina Wise and Nadine Netman and Jackson Myers and Logan Hall, who edited it. And there's a lot of very smart people. And I think that's the reason you get to take credit as a director, is that you've surrounded yourself with smarter people. And that's the reason. So I appreciate it. I hope with my heart, and I know I speak for the entire team, that I hope all of you listening are A, awake still, and B, really enjoy the film, give it a chance. And, I'm trying, Nicole, let's ask, you're a wine expert. What should people open up to watch this film on June 3rd? What should you drink during this movie?
Oh man.
Besides a lot.
I mean, we're getting into rosé season. We are in rosé season, and it's so versatile. There are so many food-worthy rosé wines out there nowadays, or like a nice chilled light red, like a Gamay. Oh my gosh, that would be good. That's good movie watching wine for me. All
right, so a light Gamay,
and with a chill,
and about hour one, a gin martini. Sounds about good. Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Nicole. It's an honor. It's a fun thing being interviewed on this podcast. So thank you for doing it.
It was fun. Thank you.
All right, everybody. If you are listening to this and it is the day of this podcast release, Chicago still has a few more tickets left, and every single ticket includes wine, and not just any wine, Ridge Vineyards Library Wines. That's at the Music Box Theater on the 26th of May. Get your tickets. I will be there, and I will try to be sober. No promises. And then also, SOMMTV.com, we have a 2-week free trial where you can watch this film and 400 hours plus of other content for free. We believe this is probably one of the best kept secrets and best deals in wines. $49.99 for an entire year. All right, everybody, please be safe. Please respect whoever cooked that meal that you are eating, and pour something nice and watch the film June 3rd. Thanks, everybody.